Hello friends, welcome to Raja's Data Engineering. In this video, I'm going to talk about one of the real-time project, that is how to build ETL pipeline by integrating many Azure Data Engineering services like Azure Databricks, Azure Data Factory, Azure SQL, Azure Data Lake Storage, and Azure Key Vault. Here, I have created one real-time project and I will walk through in the demo. So the architectural components that we are going to use for building this ETL pipeline would be Azure Databricks, Azure Data Factory, Azure SQL, Azure Key Vault, and Azure Data Lake Storage. So basically, Azure Databricks is going to be processing engine. That is going to be the core concept, core component in this ETL. That is responsible to pull the data from source and process, then finally write the data into the target location. And this Databricks ETL would be triggered based on Azure Data Factory trigger. So Azure Data Factory is used as a scheduling component in this part. And Azure SQL is our source database. Azure Databricks will pull the data from Azure SQL only. And Azure Data Lake Storage will be our target location where Databricks will write the target data. And Azure Databricks has to integrate with various components like Azure SQL in order to pull the data and Azure Data Lake Storage in order to load the data. So for that, it has to integrate with other components. So it has to connect securely. So for that, we are going to use Azure Key Vault to store the secrets within Azure Key Vault so that Databricks can securely access those keys. This is the architectural components. Now let me explain the architecture for our demo project. So here the process will start from Azure Data Factory. Azure Data Factory will trigger this Databricks notebook. So Databricks notebook basically will accept a few input and output parameters. Input parameters like which table we have to pull from SQL database and which location we have to write the target data into Azure Data Lake Storage. So for that, Azure Data Factory will have some set variable activities that will set the input table name and also output location that will be passed to Databricks notebook while triggering from ADF. I have already posted videos about input parameters. In case you haven't watched, I highly recommend to watch that video. Now, once Data Factory has triggered the notebooks using Azure Data Factory notebook activity, then the control goes to Databricks. Then Databricks has to pull the data from a SQL database and also it has to write the data to Azure Data Lake Storage. For that, it has to connect with these components. So it's not good idea to hard code the credentials within Databricks notebook. So for that, I want to introduce Azure Key Vault to securely store and retrieve the sensitive information such as username, password, server name, access key, those details. So in order to integrate Azure Databricks with Azure Key Vault, we have to create something called scoped credential. I have already posted one video how to create a scoped credential. In case you haven't watched, I highly recommend to watch that video as well to understand secret scopes. Once we have integrated and then we have populated all the secrets within Azure Key Vault. The secret, which means its username, password, access key, those information we have loaded. Now Databricks can dynamically retrieve those secrets and it can connect Azure SQL or it can connect to Azure Data Lake Storage. Now uh, from Databricks notebook, we are going to read one of the table. The table name will be given as an input from the data factory. Based on that table, it is going to connect Azure SQL database. Then it will pull all the data from the table. Then in case we have to perform any data massage or any data cleansing operation, then everything will be done within Databricks environment. Once that is done, final data should be loaded into Azure Data Lake Storage. As usual, Databricks will connect Azure Key Vault. It will retrieve the access key so that Databricks can connect to Data Lake Storage. So based on the Data Lake Storage access key, Databricks will connect to Data Lake Storage and it will write the output data that it has fetched from the source that will be written to Azure Data Lake Storage. And once the data is written to output target location, then Databricks will also calculate the number of records processed in this ETL. That output will be given back to the caller, that is ADF. So this is called output parameter. I have already posted another video also about output parameter. In case you haven't watched, I highly recommend to watch that video as well. So once the number of records are calculated by Databricks engine and it is passed back to ADF, then ADF will create those metrics, based on what is the pipeline name and what is the input table name, what is the target location, and what is the number of records processed. Those information will be collected by Databricks, data factory. Then those information will be written into one of the log table in SQL database. So this is the complete architecture. This is the complete solution. I hope you understood the entire requirement here. Based on this requirement, I have already created the pipeline. I can walk through. Let's get started with the demo. As I explained, in this architecture, we are going to involve several components. So these are the environment. This is Azure Databricks. So this is the core part which is going to run the ETL process. And the next component is Azure Data Factory. This is acting as a trigger, and also finally it is writing the metrics into one of the log table. And we are going to use Azure Key Vault to store all the secrets. So this is my Key Vault environment, and Azure SQL, that is my source. So this is my Azure SQL. So here I'm having tables. I'm going to use one of the table employee, which is having 2 columns and 1 record. And also this is having the log table where we have to write the final data. Then the next component is Azure Data Lake Storage. So this is my container. This is my storage. Within that, I have created container demo. Within that, our code will create a new folder. ADF Databricks pipeline will create a new folder, and it will write the data into this location. These are the different components. Now let us understand the core part from the Databricks notebook. I have logged into my Databricks, and cluster is also up and running. So we have to get input parameter from the ADF, that is output path, and also table. Table is the table from where we have to pull the data. This is our source and this is our target location. So basically, in order to receive the input parameter from Azure Data Factory, we have to create widgets. So I have already created widgets. So I have already explained about this input widgets in one of my previous video where I talked about input parameter. In case you want to understand more, please refer that video. So basically this is accepting input parameter, then it is being collected into 2 variables, table name and also output location. Then in the next location, we are defining JDBC connection, because using JDBC connection only, Databricks will be able to connect to Azure SQL database and it can pull some data. So JDBC connection is defined in this step. So in the next step, I'm going to create one of the data frame based on the input parameter table name. This table, this is given as input value table name. So this table name is given as an input for our data frame creation. And based on the JDBC connection which we created in the above step, JDBC connection plus table name. Based on that, we are creating one of the data frame. So basically in this step, Databricks will connect to Azure SQL and it will pull the data from this table, in this case employee table. Right. In the next step, I am not performing any transformation in this in this simple demo, but in real-time project we will have a lot of transformations that we can apply in these steps. Now finally, the target data, in this case it's employee DF. This target data I have to write into Azure Data Lake Storage. For that, first we have to create a mount point. Using mount point only, Databricks will be able to integrate with Azure Data Lake Storage. But I have already created a mount point for my data lake storage. That's the reason I have commented out. In case you haven't done in your project, you can create. Now in the next step, I'm going to write the output into Azure Data Lake Storage. So I'm using data frame write operation, and also I'm using another output parameter, that is output path. Now that parameter I'm giving into the location. So basically this path is collected into one of the variable in above step, output location. That value is given for writing the output into ADLS location. Now the output data is written into the ADLS location. Then after that, we are calculating the number of records processed in our target data frame in the output data frame. So in this case, it's very simple. I have created only one test record, so the count will be 1. Now using dbutils.notebook.exit functionality, I am passing the count back to Azure Data Factory. So in case you don't understand what is output parameter, for that as well, I have already posted one video. I highly recommend to watch that video to get more information about output parameter. Now, once all these steps are completed and the final total records are computed, it will be returned to Azure Data Factory. Then the control once again goes back to Azure Data Factory. In the Azure Data Factory, let me explain from the beginning. In the first step, I'm using one of the set variable activity. So this is actually computing the output location because this is one of the input parameter for our Databricks notebook. So for this purpose, I'm defining output location. So for that, I'm using one variable, that is output location. Then I'm giving expression. I'm giving concatenate. So I'm giving the mount point location. Then the current timestamp UTC now. That is converted as a string in this format that is appended with our mount point location. So basically, this folder will be created, employee output underscore, then the current timestamp. So output location is defined using this logic. In the next step, I'm using one more set variable to define the input table name. So the table name from which Azure Databricks has to pull the data from Azure SQL database. So that table name, I have created one variable SQL table name and I'm giving dbo.emp. This can be achieved using parameter also. Just for demo, I'm using variable here. But otherwise, parameter might be more suitable here. Right. Once we have defined our output location and also SQL table name, then the control goes to Databricks activity. In the Databricks activity, I'm giving a name in the general section. Then I'm selecting the linked service in the ADB Azure Databricks blade. So basically, linked services is nothing but it's a connection point through which Azure Data Factory can connect to Databricks. So for that, we have to create something called a linked services. This linked service will be created using access token from Databricks. That is one important point to consider. And in the linked services, we have to mention the cluster type also. So in Azure Databricks, we are having two different types of clusters. One is job cluster, another one is automated cluster. I have already posted one video about job cluster and automated cluster also. You can watch to get more information about that. So once a linked services is created, let me test that so that we can ensure ADF is able to talk to Databricks. Once this is done, in the next step, I have to uh, choose the notebook. Now let me browse so that it will get me into Databricks environment. Then I can choose the notebook. So I have already chosen the notebook, the real-time ADF trigger real-time. I have already chosen. This is actually accepting two input parameter as I told. So coming to this one, I have to choose the base parameter. So I'm clicking on base parameter. Then I'm defining two parameter. One is table, another one is output path. And coming to table, it is coming from the previous variable. So that's the reason I'm going with dynamic expression. Here I'm giving variable SQL table name. This is actually coming from the previous activity SQL table name. In the same way, I am defining output path also based on another variable output location that is coming from first set variable, this variable. Right. Now we have set up Databricks activity. Now this will call the Databricks notebook and it will execute. Once this is done, then in this step, control goes to Databricks and Databricks will execute all the steps one by one. Finally, it will return total rows. Then the total rows can be captured in another variable. So I'm using once again, I'm using set variable activity. Here I'm creating one variable record count. So here the expression to capture the output from Databricks is um, activity, whichever the activity, in this case, it's ADB activity, then dot output dot run output. That value I am converting into string because in my target table, I have created a column as varchar. That's the reason I'm converting that to string. So this is the expression to collect the output variable from the Databricks notebook. So now we have collected that information as well. Then finally I have to write this information into my log table. So my log table is this one, pipe underscore log. Let me run. Currently we don't have any record. Number of records affected 0. We don't have anything. So basically in this copy activity, what I'm doing is, it is I have created a source data set that is based on ADLS location CSV file. I have created one dummy file. On top of that, I'm adding additional columns like pipeline name. So this is coming from one of the system variable pipeline name. This is what I have given. Then the next one, table name. So this is actually coming from this variable SQL table name. So that is what I'm given. Table name, SQL table name. And the next value, output location, that is also coming from the from another variable, that is output location. Output location. Then finally processed time. Now at what time it processed. So for that I'm giving UTC now, the current timestamp. And the record count, that is actually coming from Databricks, and it is collected in one of the set variable record count. That variable I'm using here at the rate variables record count. Now these variables are collected as a source for this copy activity. This is actually forming as one record: pipeline name, table name, output location, process time, and record count. Then in the sync activity, I'm creating one data set for Azure SQL database that will be pointing to this particular table. Once that is done, in the mapping tab, what I'm doing is basically I'm giving the connection between my, I'm mapping the source and target, pipeline name to pipeline name, table name to input table, output location to output location. Basically I'm defining, I'm mapping. Once mapping is done, then this particular record will be inserted into our sync, that is nothing but Azure SQL table pipe underscore log. This is the entire process. I hope you understood the logic given in the Databricks notebook and also the logic given in the data factory pipeline. In case you don't understand, you can go back and try to understand the requirement and also the coding that I have done for this demo. Now everything is completed. We have set up all the components in the architecture: Databricks, Data Factory, Azure Key Vault, Azure SQL Database, and also our Azure Data Lake Storage for final storage. Now everything is ready. Now it's a time to trigger the process. So I'm going to trigger from Azure Data Factory. So in order to trigger, either we can click on debug, that is mainly suitable for development, or once we have tested our pipeline, even we can create a trigger to schedule based on particular time interval. But in this case, I will go with debug. It's one-time execution. So let me start the process. So currently output is empty in our pipe log table. We don't have any records, but after execution, the data will be written into this output location of Azure Data Lake Storage, and the number of records affected will be written into this particular log table. I hope you understood. Let me trigger. Click on debug. Process started. We can see the activities are getting completed one by one. Let us wait for all the activities to be completed. Now ADB activity is running. This is the core part. This is doing the actual ETL in this demo. Now all the activities are completed. So let us go to this record count. Basically it will give the number of records processed. It's 1. And also we can see the output for other activities, like what is our output location. This is the output location. So we can go to Data Lake Storage and we can see the output under this one. Similarly, what is the table name? SQL table name. It's dbo.emp, that is the table name. So we can see all the activities are succeeded, so we didn't get any error. Now in order to check the output file, let me get into Azure Data Lake Storage and let me refresh. It has created one output folder as per our logic: employee output underscore timestamp. Okay, this particular folder name was decided in this activity output location. Now within that we can see the output which was written by Databricks. This is our output. It's one of the CSV file which is containing only one record for this demo. Right, now let me get into Azure SQL database. So basically it would have created one record for this log table. So based on the latest execution metrics, it would have populated those values into this log table. Let me execute. We can see one record. earlier it was empty. Now we have executed one run. That's the reason we can see the metrics for that particular run. What is the pipeline name? It's ADB real-time project. That is the pipeline name we have given here. If you look at the pipeline name, this is ADB real-time project. Actually this is coming from the system variable in the copy activity. We are giving this pipeline. It is coming from system variable, right? The second value dbom, that is coming from another variable, and the output location, that is also coming from another set variable. Process time, that is UTC now, based on that function this is coming. And this record count, basically this is coming from Databricks. It is actually created in the Databricks using this function. Then it is given back to Azure Data Factory. Then it is collected in this set variable activity, that is given to copy activity, and copy activity is writing that value into pipe log table. This is the end-to-end pipeline. So in this real-time project, what we have done is, we have pulled some data from Azure SQL database, and if needed, we are doing some transformation. Then finally, we are writing the data into Azure Data Lake Storage. And in order to integrate with other services, we are using Azure Key Vault to securely store and retrieve the data. And once we have returned the data to target location in Azure Data Lake Storage, then finally we are calculating the number of records affected by Databricks, and it is given back to Azure Data Factory. Then Azure Data Factory is writing the metrics into one of the log table in Azure SQL table. This is the entire architecture, and this is the entire flow as well. I hope you understood. Hope you enjoyed this real-time project. If you like the content of this video, please like and comment in the channel. Also, please subscribe and don't forget to click on the bell button to get latest updates and development tips on Databricks. Thank you.